Hello and welcome to episode 318 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick, here as always with
Jason Rabinowitz, making time during my quick lunch break during a wonderful week of meetings here in Virginia. Only the best for this audience. I got to make it work.
It's the lunch break podcast, but we'll make it do. We're recording earlier than usual. This is the 30th of April, Wednesday, so something is bound to happen.
Good things, I hope.
Now that we've done this, hopefully good things. Yeah, hopefully some great announcements or something like that. But Jason, let's back up and talk about what you got up to this weekend, because even though it didn't work out
I don't want to talk
in its
about
entirety, I'm still insanely jealous.
So what I was alluding to last week is myself, Jeremy Dwyer Lindgren, who's been on the podcast a number of times, along with Seth Miller, who's also been on the podcast a number of times. We had a great plan for last Saturday. We were going to go up to Montreal and then fly with Air Inuit on one of its gravel kit equipped 737-200 aircraft, 47-year-old aircraft. Unfortunately, it did 47-year-old aircraft things. We were intending to fly from Montreal up to, I'm not going to say the city names. City names they're really just the airport names because there is no city or even town, but from Montreal up to YPX, from YPX down to YGL, which is Le Grand, I can say that one, and Le Grand back down to Montreal, all in a day. It did not quite go that way. We all got on board. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention also a combi gravel-equipped 737-200. This particular day, it had 3 slots for cargo and a 60-passenger layout. We pushed back on time. We went out to the runway. We started the runway roll, and we got to 108 knots before we rejected the takeoff, which I'm really happy I was recording video of the takeoff because I got some pretty sweet video of the thrust reverser buckets, basically, deploying, because it's that old an aircraft, and I was right next to them. Wasn't happy in the moment to see those come out because I knew that was it at that point. That was the day. But it was not only did I capture it, but my iPhone decided to focus on the correct thing at that exact moment. So that was
which is cool. A miracle.
For an iPhone, yeah, it is an actual miracle that it cooperated, especially with a wet window because the weather in Montreal was awful. But I'm guessing there are very few people out there these days who have experienced a high-speed rejected takeoff in a 737-200 recently. So, can cross that one off the AvGeek bucket list. I'm going to try again another one of these days. Everyone at Air Inuit was amazing. From the VP of operations met us before the flight, gave us some nice swag, gave us a nice model of an NG combi and all sorts of other stuff. The pilots were great. The flight attendants were great. Pat, we made a new friend. If you are listening to the podcast today, thank you. Thank you for helping us out and just generally being awesome and hanging out with us the whole day. Pat was actually an Air Inuit pilot commuting up to where we were going to turn around from to operate flights that continued onward, I think, on some of their turboprop aircraft. Because surprisingly, or I guess not surprisingly, if you know the operation, they have a lot of onward connections. This isn't just an out and back. There are a lot of connections for people. But Pat, thanks for keeping us company. Sorry, your duty day was quite long. But Jeremy actually stuck it out to the next day where they operated a couple hours behind schedule, but in a fully passenger configured version of the combi, which apparently is extremely rare. And then I guess that aircraft still has not got back into service because the other day they operated that particular flight, I think on, what was it, a Dash 8 Q100 or a Dash 100 or something like that? Like not at all the correct aircraft, but we picked a particularly hectic week for Air Inuit, unfortunately.
Didn't quite work out the way you wanted it to, but you did get some AvGeek bucket list stuff.
Yeah.
We'll put the video in the show notes and we can console Jason until he has a chance to try it again.
Yeah, we'll do it again one of these days. But at least Jeremy got to go, even if it wasn't the day he wanted.
There you go. All right, let's get to this week's news. Topping the list this week is Pakistan closing its airspace to Indian aircraft. This follows an attack that occurred in Kashmir last week. Then there was ratcheting up of tensions among India and Pakistan, both at the governmental level and elsewhere. And then Pakistan closed its airspace to Indian aircraft. Now, this might not seem like a huge deal, it only affects 120 flights per day. But the flights it does affect are India's long haul flights, because without access to Pakistani airspace, most of those flights don't have the range to make it from North America to India. So this is adding between 3 and 6 hours of total trip time to a lot of those flights. Most of Air India's North American flights are now stopping in Vienna or Copenhagen en route to North America, certainly. And some of them are stopping en route from North America, like the San Francisco Delhi flight, which is now stopping in Vienna on the eastbound leg. Well, they're both eastbound legs. So on the leg back to India. So this is one of those special flights that flies eastbound both ways because of the jet stream, taking advantage of the jet stream, but does not have the legs to make it all the way back to Delhi on the return leg, I guess you could call it. So a lot of fuel and a lot of time going into this. Theoretically, this lasts through the 23rd of May, though we have no idea if that will be cut short or extended.
Ooh, yeah. I wouldn't bank on this one resolving itself anytime soon. If anything, I can envision it being extended to all airlines, not just Indian registered airlines. Some flights are getting lucky, some are not. It looks like the Air India flight out of JFK to Delhi is managing. It's actually not all that much longer. It usually was about 13 hours. Now it's about 15 hours, so it's a couple extra hours. But not so lucky going the other way with stops in Vienna or Copenhagen. Not great for the new Air India, an airline really trying to remake itself, and now having to do a one stop to North America really makes its competitors look like a better choice again.
Yeah. I mean, and the interesting thing from an aviation perspective is seeing which aircraft in which configuration are able to make the flight nonstop still and which now need to stop. Because if you look at JFK versus Dulles and the aircraft difference, I mean, it's not that much further, but it's just further enough. And the aircraft difference is just enough that Dulles flight needs to stop in Vienna.
Oh, the Delhi to JFK flight is stopping as well, but it seems like they're...
I mean, on the eastbound flight.
Oh, on the eastbound.
Out of Dulles. Yeah.
Yeah, that's rough. It's not much farther, but yeah, I guess it is just that little extra
just
bit.
Enough.
Difference. And that's JFK is served by the A350-900, while Dulles is the little baby version of the 787. So I guess it's... And I thought the 787-8 is supposed to be able to go wherever. Doesn't matter how long the range, but apparently not. That extra 250 miles.
Yeah, I mean, it's just enough with the routing. So we'll keep an eye on this to see if it does expand to any other aircraft. Right now, it only affects Indian registered aircraft and aircraft operating for Indian Airlines. It does not impact overflights by other airlines that continue to use Pakistan's airspace, but depending on the level of tensions between India and Pakistan and any active conflict, that could certainly change rather quickly. And we've seen that in the past, and that would have a much more dramatic impact on air traffic in the region, especially given all of the other airspace that's already unavailable to aircraft in both that region and other regions that kind of continue to compress the available airspace.
Yeah, at this rate, we're really going to need to get our hurry on skipping flights completely and just get to like orbital injections where you fly into Earth's orbit, rotate around the world, and then just drop down right where you're going, because there's not going to be any airspace to get from A to B the way things are going. Not great.
No, not great. I'm still working on my teleporting machine too.
Let me know when you got that worked out.
Though the problem is that if we do invent teleportation, this podcast pretty much goes away. So maybe I'll slow roll that one. Let's head to Spain and Portugal, where massive power outages this week brought air traffic not quite to a grinding halt, but about as close to a complete halt as you can get.
Because you never want to go full Heathrow.
No. So this was major power cuts across Spain and Portugal and parts of France where the electrical grid interfaces with the electrical grid in Spain. And it was particularly bad in Portugal and in southern Spain, because not only did you have electrical failures to contend with, in Portugal you had a higher concentration because it's just more air traffic is concentrated in basically one or two airports, Lisbon and Porto. But in southern Spain, you also had radar failures throughout the day. So not only electrical failures, but actual radar failures. So the Sevilla sector in Spain was zero rated for quite a few hours. And it took a while for everything to get back. So there was not only dealing with electrical outages, getting things back online, but then there was the radar failure as well. So it was just an absolute mess.
Yeah, they definitely learned the hard way which parts of their infrastructure can sustain for a day or longer on backup generator power and which didn't work at all. So great. I hope they make improvements next time, though no one really expects or prepares for a blackout of that range, of that duration and that severity. That's just hard because even if your equipment is up, if communication lines are down, like they mostly were, you can't do much. So it's really impressive that the Spanish and Portuguese airports were able to do as much as they were able to do, because as we saw with Heathrow, power go out, airport shuts down. And that was not the case for the most part.
No,
in Portugal. They were able to live
best, yeah.
along quite well. Some flights went out without even so much as a delay, if you were lucky enough, which is great. I was actually just on a call with some business partners over in Spain, and they said, yeah, we didn't really know what to do. We just kind of sat there and our computers didn't work, phones didn't work. So I just opened up a book and started reading for the first time in a while. I guess a lot of people in Spain and Portugal were in the same boat because there was nothing else to do.
Yeah. Well,
Speaking
I mean,
of not going anywhere too quickly. Newark. What are we going to do with Newark? As we've talked about several times, we actually haven't had to talk about this somewhat recently. Things have been quite stable, as long as you ignore
not good,
not stable,
but stable.
But if you ignore the debilitating runway construction going on at Newark, which already has one of its two main runways closed. So if the wind blows the wrong way, you're down to one runway, which is not good. But the FAA, again, had major issues with the Philly TRACON being able to control Newark airspace, which was moved over to be remotely controlled because of air traffic control staffing issues. But this one, combined with the runway construction and the shortage of air traffic controllers, hit especially hard. United, the main hub airline at Newark, said it disrupted 17,000 of its passengers, caused 37 diversions, 100 flight cancellations, and, quote, many flights delayed 3+ hours, mostly due, honestly, to the air traffic control staffing after the fact. I have never seen this before, but after the FAA got the systems back up and running, staffing issues triggered a ground delay program with what they said a maximum number of delay minutes of 15 hours, which is just, I've never seen anything like that. I don't know of any flight that was actually delayed 15 hours, but just to see that written was kind of wild.
Yeah, this was one of those situations where I was listening to the tower audio, and there were a couple flights that were trying to figure out how to go out VFR.
Yeah, that happens. Like, just keep it under 4,000 on your way down south.
Well, I mean, and it was, they were trying to work it out. There was a Delta flight that was very serious about it, but because of the thunderstorms that were impacting Minneapolis, the Delta dispatch folks wouldn't let them go VFR.
That checks out. Hey, I got caught up in this too. I was trying to depart LaGuardia at that time. I was on a United Express operated by Mesa flight, which went tech down in Dulles, and then it got caught up trying to head northbound to LaGuardia and got stuck at Dulles. And I bailed on it and flew. I used my standby privileges on American to grab a seat down to DCA. And I know I made the right call because a commuting pilot who was also on my Dulles flight did the same exact thing and sat next to me on the way down to DCA. So you got to do what you got to do to get home or get to your office in Virginia, in my case. But man, they got to do something about this because it's bad.
Well, Jason, Congress has a plan.
Oh, no. No good sentence ever begins that way.
Yesterday, the House Transport and Infrastructure Committee released its proposed FAA modernization budget, which calls for $15 billion through 2029 that would generally focus on the purchase and implementation of new air traffic control facilities and technologies. So here's a breakdown of what is in that proposal that is being marked up as we speak today in the committee. So the proposal calls for $2.6 billion to replace air traffic control towers and TRACON facilities, $2 billion to replace other air traffic control buildings, facilities, what have you, $3 billion to upgrade radar systems, $4.75 billion for new telecommunications infrastructure, $1 billion to recruit and train controllers, $500 million for runway safety projects, $550 million to sustain and replace other air traffic control infrastructure, $260 million to improve air safety in Alaska specifically, and $300 million to fund other modernization programs, including those involving performance-based navigation and data communications.
Okay. Hopefully we're beyond the point of this where the FAA just ends up burning billions of dollars with little or nothing to show for it. I'm a little suspicious that the biggest line item here, $4.7 billion, is for new telecommunications infrastructure. I'd love to hear the justification on how probably one of the simplest parts of this is the most expensive part, whatever. But hey, if industry groups are, quote, largely, to quote our show notes here, behind it, I guess we're doing the right thing.
I say industry groups are largely behind it because it's pretty much every industry group.
Oh, there are a lot of logos in this PDF.
There are a lot of logos. So we're talking OEMs. So we've got Airbus, Boeing. We've got all of the aviation manufacturing companies as well, GE Aerospace. And we're talking insurance groups, unions, specialist trade groups like the EAA and AOPA, airline unions. Everyone seems to be behind this because remember what this is this is them saying, okay, we're actually going to spend money on the FAA and they're going to know how much money they're going to have and they're going to know what it's going to go for. And they're not going to have to come back and say, can we please have money? Because we're going to be beholden to these short-term budgetary cycles. So in my mind, this is in fact good news because it gives some certainty to the process.
Sure. Let's just not burn billions of dollars with nothing to show like we've done for the past couple of decades. That the proof will be in the pudding, and the pudding is getting pretty ripe right now. So let's see some actual results before we celebrate.
Okay, fine. Airbus has reached an agreement to take on the Spirit Aerosystems A350 and A220 work. They had been in negotiations following Boeing's planned reacquisition of Spirit. So Spirit used to be part of Boeing. It gets spun out. Spirit says we need to diversify who we make airplane parts for. So they continue to make 80% of the 737, most of the fuselage and some of the other parts. Then they say, okay, you know what? We can also do stuff for the A350. We'll make fuselage components for the A350 and we'll build the A220 wing. Then Boeing says, things are so bad at Spirit that we need to reabsorb them so that we can have complete control. And Airbus says, you're going to owe us some money. And now they've agreed on $439 million. So as the amount of compensation, which will be seen by Airbus as it brings in loss-making wing and fuselage productions from Spirit Aerosystems. Airbus will also then provide Spirit with a no-interest line of credit of $200 million.
Whatever Airbus is going to do to bring their own destiny into their own control at this point. It's not the way they probably wanted to do it, but better than Boeing being in control of Airbus's own fate.
Yeah. So what Airbus gets is the A350 fuselage production facility in Kinston, North Carolina, the French A350 fuselage site at Saint-Nazaire. It gets the Belfast A220 wing production, the Scottish wing components for the A350 in Prestwick, and that site also produces A320 components. They will also get, back in the US, pylon work at Spirit's Wichita, Kansas site, as well as Morocco sites for the A220 and A321 components in Casablanca. So
Cool.
I guess that shows that aircraft production is mighty complicated.
Yeah, well, they've all made it that way at this point. They farmed out as much work as they can to others, but now it's coming home.
Let's move on to airlines. This is exclusive reporting from Reuters as of late last night on the 29th of April. Reuters is reporting that JetBlue is negotiating a partnership with United, not an exclusive, but JetBlue separately is also being sued by American Airlines because of the collapse of talks regarding the resumption or revitalization of what was their previous Northeast alliance. So American wants $1 million from JetBlue.
Yeah, I mean, me too.
yeah, don't we all? Don't we all? So this is interesting. The Reuters report says that United is looking to form a partnership with JetBlue because United is very interested in having a much larger presence at JFK.
Me too. We got a lot of similarities here. But I did like that quote from Kirby that I think you texted us in the group chat earlier.
I did. I texted it last night because I hadn't seen it previously, and it's just such a great quote.
From Kirby. But man, all the headache, all of the brain damage of buying a whole airline just to get there. That's a lot to do. And that's a quote about having a larger JFK presence once again. United, he really believes, and he's not wrong, that giving up their presence at JFK was a monumental error. And I would say the operations at Newark these days would confirm that as being a monumental error. But having to buy the entirety of JetBlue to get back to JFK, maybe not the best way to go about doing that.
Kirby, to his point, says that that's not what we want to do. That said, there is certainly speculation that this partnership sets up the long-term road to United eventually acquiring JetBlue.
If JetBlue can survive that long, sure.
Well, if they don't survive that long, then United just can come in and scoop
a bunch of slots on the market, boys.
There you go. Let's talk about Southwest because they're honestly, who knows what they're doing at this point. All of the things that we thought we knew about what Southwest was going to do when they moved from their Southwest model to their every other airline model, but slightly worse. They're just calling them different names now. Is that am I understanding things correctly?
Want to get away Plus becomes Choice. Anytime becomes Choice Preferred. Business Select becomes Choice Extra. Want to get away becomes Basic. So they'll have Basic, Choice, Choice Preferred, and Choice Extra. To everyone that works at Southwest, you're great. I love working with all of you, but your airline is dead. You are now Elliott Financial Management Planning Airlines, or whatever the full name of Elliott is. You are no longer Southwest. You are the worst version of every other U.S. airline combined into one thing. And that one thing is not desirable. I don't know who wants to fly what Southwest is becoming, because there's nothing to offer. It is just, you have taken the worst parts of every other airline and just called it the new Southwest. They all know that. Nobody at Southwest wants this, but that's where we are.
Well, we'll see how it works for them or doesn't. We could be back here with really want to get away, definitely want to get away, and absolutely need to get away, which
and then already
probably
gone.
Would have been better. Already gone. In reporting its earnings this week, Saffron, the French company that manufactures all sorts of aerospace components, including its joint venture with GE Aerospace that manufactures the CFM56 engine, they say that tariff surcharges are coming and will be applied to both OEMs and airlines. They quote, "We will not be shy." That's not terribly surprising. What's more interesting to me is how they're looking to get around some of these tariffs with logistics work, where instead of moving these parts through the logistics network where they might touch the US just for convenience reasons rather than any actual work being done on the parts, they might be bundled with other things and something like that. That's not going to happen anymore. They're also shifting some of the work to Canada and Mexico from other regions to take advantage of the MCA, which was the renegotiated former NAFTA deal from 2020. So an interesting, every company is finding different ways to work around these things and to negate their impact on their bottom line. So it'll be interesting to see how successful they are, both with passing along those tariff costs, but also reconfiguring their supply chain.
What a mess for no particular or apparent reason.
Well, yeah, we're figuring that one out as we go, unfortunately. A mess for no particular reason is exactly how I would describe this report from the Indian Air Accident Investigation Branch. An Air India A320neo was departing Goa for Hyderabad on the 5th of December 2024. It was supposed to taxi, line up and wait on runway 28, and then depart. However, it lined up on the adjacent taxiway A and tried to depart from there. The aircraft reached a maximum of 124 knots before the controller noticed that the aircraft looked, quote, closer than it usually does. At which point the controller told the aircraft to reject its takeoff. They did, and they went back to the parking stand. The interesting thing here is that there's always that little twist on why something happened, because the crew wasn't rushed. There wasn't, other things going on. It wasn't foggy. The visibility was good, even though it was nighttime. So what happened? Well, the AAIB says a few interesting things happened that affected this particular flight, including the fact that the first officer had issues with their electronic flight bag. So they were trying to figure that out. They rushed their takeoff checks, and they didn't quite follow the precise lineup instructions. And the AIB found that a few changes by the IT department's sleep optimization settings for the EFBs would go a long way to fixing this. And they also encouraged operators to cross-check where they are on the moving map before taking off.
That's always good because, hey, it could be wrong. You want to make sure you are where you think you are.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the end of the show because, Jason, I know you need to go. A few airline milestones. American Airlines has taken delivery of their first pair of 787s with a third closely following behind it that includes their new business class suite. Those aircrafts are November 845 Mike Delta and November 846 Alpha November. And speaking of 787s, Boeing is celebrating a milestone this week. Congratulations on the 787 carrying 1 billion passengers.
1 billion passengers across nearly 5 million flights, a fleet of 1,175 plus jets. Why can't they just give us the actual number? But it's something more than 1,175 jets, nearly 5 million flights, 30 million flight hours, 2,000 plus orders from 89 customers, 85 plus customers, 520 plus airports. Give us the actual numbers. What's with these plus things? I don't know. But hey, I think they said somewhere in this release, it is the fastest any wide-body aircraft has gotten to this figure, I think, which is pretty cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Faster than any wide-body commercial airplane in history. Wow. Good for Boeing. It needs a win, and that's a nice win.
Yeah. Elsewhere, EASA says that it'll be about 3 to 6 years before the C919 receives certification there. So seems like a lengthy timeline, but they're on a timeline.
Yeah. Apparently, they had hoped until recently 2028 to 31 was more realistic, but apparently not, according to this Aviation Week article. That doesn't seem likely. I know a lot of people aren't exactly rooting for the C919, but competition's competition. And if it lights a fire under Airbus and Boeing to do something new, I'm all for it, even if this is never really going to become a market winner or even runner-up in Europe and the Americas. I guess you could forget about the Americas right now, but hey, competition is sorely needed.
We'll take it. And speaking of competition, sort of, the MC-21 in almost full Russification mode has made its first flight. That aircraft spent 1 hour and 15 minutes in the air out of Irkutsk, including a domestic APU, air conditioning system, pressure regulation system, lighting, and landing gear and hydraulic systems that have all kind of been swapped out from a hybrid Western components to include pure Russian components. And this is the same aircraft that made the first flight with the Russian engines for the MC-21 a few months ago. So I guess things proceeding apace for both the Russification of the MC-21 and the Superjet. So we'll see more Russian aircraft at some point.
Yeah, less interested in the Superjet as so much as the MC-21, but progress is progress. Don't like the circumstances it's under, but we'll see what happens.
Between those two aircraft and the continued production of the Tupolev, I mean, it's an interesting time in the industry.
Again, not the best of circumstances for any of this, but whatever. New planes are new planes, even if they're old.
There you go. Okay, Jason, I know you have to get off, so we'll end it there with this being episode 318 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick here, as always, with
Jason Rabinowitz. Thanks for listening.